So we are going to now proceed to our guest lecturer, Professor Jameson, who has done a tremendous amount of work in the interfaith area. He was president, right, of the Interfaith Council in Las Vegas for several years, and he started the Global Compassion Council, which is an advisory board for the Charter for Compassion. He also has written 3 books. He went to the Pacifica University where he did mythical studies, and so he's written 3 books. One called, I'll probably mispronounce this, Faithon, is that okay? About ancient classical antiquity myths, and then one on Chinese myth called The Monkey, a story for our mythic moment. And then the last one in that series is on the Ramayana, and I think you brought some copies of that today. So, and I used that as a source material for a lecture a few years ago, pre-pandemic. Instead of BC and AD, we're going to be pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And then now there's a current book too. You have a new one on the Peace Pilgrim Pictures. Correct. So I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about that, because you've got all these different connections with interfaith activities, and you're also a pastor, right? Is it associate pastor or pastor?
Volunteer associate pastor.
Volunteer associate. Of your Grace Community Church.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you. So. Forward here and.
Would you like to sit?
Chair?
Yeah,
You can
let's
leave
get
the
you,
chair
let's
instead.
set you up, because that way we get you on for the world to see. We actually have some, if we can just tilt it this way a little bit so everybody can see you. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Because you have worldwide audience, and from India all the way to. So you'll be the man of the hour. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I always begin my classes with a moment of silence. So namaste, a moment of silence. Shanti, shanti, shanti. I think I've known Swami for maybe 10, 15 years. We've grown old together.
Yes.
And it's a joy to be here with you today. And Swami asked me to share maybe a few words on interfaith and kind of the journey of interfaith. And so I always defer to the master, who was the champion of interfaith, and to Gandhiji, who asked, "What is your tradition?" He said, "Well, let's see, I'm a Christian, I'm a Taoist, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a Jew, I'm a Hindu." And with great humor, appreciating that the labels don't mean very much. What means something is realization. And so I was 17 when I first read Autobiography of a Yogi, and thought this was a fanciful tale. But then when I read about Lahira Mahashai levitating above the bed where his wife was sleeping and she woke up and saw him, told him, "Would you get down here?" I have come to realize that everything in that book is true. And I've come to realize that the pain that we experience in the world today is really a manifestation of a transformation. My wife, Dr. Florence Jameson, is an obstetrician gynecologist. And what we appreciate is that in any moment of birthing, there is a great travail. And you women, I assume some of you have had children and maybe grandchildren, and you know. And so we are in that moment where we are shifting from Kali Yuga to another age, an age in which the truths of the One will become manifest on the planet, and we will experience a new opportunity to truly understand our true identity and our true purpose in being on the planet. So I always begin my classes with fossils because I'm an amateur paleontologist. And I always bring meteors and fossils and various things, and I think I even brought a little meteor with me, but to give them a sense that what the great traditions are speaking of is actually how the universe has unfolded. That as we learn from quantum physics, that it's emerged from a moment of singularity. And so I tell my students, that makes you my brother and you my sister, and you my sister and you my sister, because we emerged from the One. And that emergence suggests a quality of value, which I call that moment of unity, love. And Albert Einstein has actually coined the term cosmogenesis, which embraces three principles: unity, diversity, and growth. And that we can understand the universe from here to 1 billion light years away as falling under those three principles. And so love is associated with unity, compassion is associated with diversity, and hope is associated with growth. And anything that's not growing is dying. That's what we learn in biology. And so we're all part of an experience of the divine manifesting itself on the planet. And it's been my joy to be part of the interfaith world. So it was in 1972 that I first learned to meditate under the guidance of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And it was in the 80s I learned centering prayer from Father Thomas Keating and a number of Christian luminaries who discovered that actually within the Christian tradition, there are traditions of meditation. And so what we learn in interfaith work is actually traditions of meditation are in every tradition, if we had eyes to see it. And so we're living in a world right now that seems very precarious. But I believe what Dr. Martin Luther King suggested is that we're living in the arc of history. And the arc of history always bends toward the divine. And so even as in the story of the Ramayana, where we have Ram being killed by a really awful person, but then as it's retold, and you know the Ramayana has been retold by so many, by Richard Buck, who was a professor at the University of Nevada, Reno. And he translated two texts. One was the Ramayana and the other was the Mahabharata. But in his version of the Ramayana, he has Ravana writing a letter to Ram after he's revivified by Hanuman. And in the letter, he says, I actually needed you, and I needed to go through this because I'm just part of the divine play. And that what's unfolding is the appreciation that there is truth and beauty and goodness in the world. But there are qualities that are demonic qualities which hold us back from the realization of those divine values. And so it was in 1993 that I attended the second Parliament of World Religion. I was not even a twinkle, in fact, my grandmother was not even a twinkle in the eye of her mother in 1893. But in 1993, at the Palmer House, which is where Vivekananda was for the first Parliament, I got to experience so many luminaries, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Wayne Teasdale and B. Griffiths and Swami Atmavidyanandaji and so many individuals. And as they passed through the halls, I literally, my body was shifted because I could feel the Shakti moving past me. And when I listened to Wayne Teasdale, you may know of him, he was a disciple of B. Griffiths, who was an English monastic, Christian monastic, who went to India and started an ashram and did a lot to help people appreciate the commonalities of the various traditions. But when I listened to these individuals, I realized there's an immense opportunity, which is to realize that yes, we are born into a family. Yes, we are born into a tradition. Yes, we are born into a nation. But as Amelia Earhart, how many of you know this name, Amelia Earhart? As she said when she was flying her airplane, she said, up here, I see no borders, I see no boundaries, I see just horizons. And so we're living in a moment of just horizons. We're living in a moment that calls us to be courageous, that calls us to deepen our meditation practice, that calls us to deepen our karma yoga, to be out in the world, to be of service in the world. And so my wife is my teacher. We started the first free and charitable clinic in the state of Nevada. And last year we saw 14,000 people who have no access to healthcare.
Wow.
And everything we do is free. So I'm a big believer, as I've learned about the traditions of India and learned about the traditions of Christianity and other traditions, that we are called not just to be a Raj yogi or even just a karmic yogi, or just a this or that. We're called to all four pieces. We're called to serve the Lord with our head and our heart, with our body and with our soul. So all the yogas are to be employed in this process. And that's what I've learned through the interfaith experience. So it was in 1988, we started in Wichita, Kansas, the North American Interfaith Network. It was in 1994 that a group of us went to Stanford University and over 4 years started the United Religions Initiative, which is the largest interfaith movement in the world, representing over 1,200 interfaith cooperation circles. And it was in the late 80s that we started the Interfaith Council of Southern Nevada. And unfortunately, I've not been able to step out of the position of presidency, because every time I try to, nobody will step forward. I'm stuck. I'm stuck, Swami. But it's a joy, because as some of my friends say, when they come to Interfaith Council events, I actually have more joy here than I have had back at my church or my mosque or my synagogue. So why? Why? Because right now we're living in a time where Ravana is having a huge effect on the planet. His influence has touched many cultures and many nations, including this one, and I would say including India, as we look at nationalism and the growth of nationalism, and specifically religious nationalism. And I do believe that the great Swamis, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Paramahansa Yogananda, they would sigh with what they see. Mm-hmm. They would sigh with the realization that we now have the capacity to destroy the planet And in fact, if anybody noticed the air quality today, we are destroying the planet at a very rapid pace. But what I know is that there are more unseen beings on the planet than there are of us. What I know, and I don't know much, what I know is that more and more people are appreciating the story of the blind man and the elephant, that they realize that there's a certain quality of ignorance, and so interfaith dialogue becomes an opportunity to open the window and dismiss that ignorance. I was 2 years ago in France at Plum Village, which was the home of Thich Nhat Hanh. And I learned something really simple, and I try to share this wherever I go, that really all that's required is deep listening and loving speech. And deep listening is really just another name for meditation. Because what we know is that Ananda, bliss, is resident inside of us. And what I tell my students is that you are born, your birthright is Ananda, it's bliss. And you've been swindled by a variety of different people and sources to think that fear and anger and anxiety is your birthright. And if you would just take a few moments each day to deeply listen within the cave of the heart, to deeply listen to Swamis, and I don't know if you're in Swami training or what your situation is, Jeff, but you certainly are doing wonderful things here by having this space. And I think you are the host of this space.
Well, ask him.
Yes. Bless you. And by students who are studying consciousness and realizing how powerful consciousness is I was with one of the founders of Microsoft a couple of weeks ago in Seattle. And he has this beautiful penthouse that looks out over the ocean and the islands. And he was telling me, he said, Gary, AI will be the answer to everything. And I said, John, you are so smart. You helped found this incredible organization. And you understand the term operating system. He said, oh yes, very clearly, operating system. I said, well, where I come from, there's appreciation that there are actually dual operating systems in each of us. And that the first operating system is the biological operating system, which feeds off of the first three chakras. Those chakras we share in consciousness with all sentient life. All species desire to survive and be secure. All species desire to have connection, relationship. All species desire to gratify themselves. But I said, John, there's another operating system, the spiritual operating system. And it begins when we understand that there's a quality of awareness in our hearts, in our throats, in the pineal gland. He said there's even something called the spirit molecule. Imagine that, DMT. I tell my students, you don't need any drugs. They're all already in your body. All you have to do is dose every day. Anybody know what dose means? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. And how do we dose every day? We dose by meditating and by doing something in a karmic way to make the world a better place. It's not complicated. But I said, John, in my opinion, AI will help with tactical issues that we have, like how do I get to the dentist's office, right? I already have that. We all have that in our phones, in our Teslas or whatever. But it won't help us to discover the bliss that is embedded inside of us. AI will never grow our souls. Only that spiritual operating system, which is what I've learned from the masters. And so if we attend to that, then we've got an opportunity. So our Interfaith Council does a few things. One, we put on the Interfaith Forums every fall. And the Interfaith Forums are designed to help reduce ignorance. So I brought last night, Swami saw and Jeff saw my statue of Nataraj, Shiva dancing on the demon of Avidya. And the bliss as we reduce ignorance. And so we do that, and we have very full audiences. And I would invite you, Jeff, to join our Interfaith Council.
Sure.
Remember, we have a wonderful fellow named Baba. Anybody know Baba? He's over on the east side. He tried to open a temple over in Henderson, and the homeowner said, "Not in my backyard." And we prevailed because it's a religious institution. But then the mayor changed the rules of the chessboard, and so Baba was voted down. So we try to reduce the ignorance in our community around our faith traditions. We try to help people appreciate that we share the golden rule. We share the opportunity to be of service to one another. We share the privilege of knowing the divine together. And so the Interfaith Fall Forums are really quite lovely. And if I get your email,
I
Jeff.
think that's what you're scheduled for.
I'm speaking in November at an Interfaith Council, and I give them my bio and my pictures.
Oh, did
Is
you?
it the same one? I don't
Is
know.
this Alita Nelson? She's a Baha'i?
Yeah,
Is it? Okay, he's setting it up.
yeah, she contacted me and I can't be there that time, so he's gonna do it for us.
Fantastic. Well, we'll look forward to seeing
But I
you
need to
there.
get your information and we'll connect. So I'll give
Yeah,
you all
yeah,
my
yeah.
stuff,
I'd love to have you on the council as well. So we do that, and we have a Thanksgiving service where we gather together the week before Thanksgiving, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. And we give thanks, gratitude, which I think is the sort of baseline attitude for everything. And that's a wonderful service. And then in the fall, before the pandemic, we would have what we call the compassion breakfast. It used to be called the mayor's prayer breakfast, but we were contacted by Ronald Reagan Jr. I don't know if you know,
Yeah.
he's very against religion.
Yeah.
And he threatened to sue the school district for allowing their students to come to such a breakfast.
Oh,
And we did no proselytization. We had the mayors read prayers from different traditions. So Carolyn Goodman, who's Jewish, would read a Hindu prayer
Oh.
and so on and so forth. And we had 800 people who came to the breakfast, about 400 students from across the valley and 400 business leaders and community people. It's a lovely event, but the pandemic obviously shut a lot of things down, and now we're going to ramp it back up again. But what we're most proud of is we've been doing something called Camp Anytown. And Camp Anytown is a place where we bring about 70 or 80 students. We take them to Lee Canyon, which is here in Mount Charleston. And the county opens their space to us, their camp. And there at Lee Canyon, they learn how to eliminate, not reduce, but eliminate, imagine this, prejudice, bias, and bigotry.
wow.
And so the students, in fact, the executive director, Rico, said, when I came into this, I was 17, I was Chicano, and I was not going to speak to a black person, and I was not definitely going to speak to a white person, and I was there because I was forced to be there. Well, Rico married a white lady, became our executive director, and what the kids experience, and you can look it up online if you have a desire to in Google, but Camp Anytown, Las Vegas. And what you'll see on the video is Ananda. You'll see bliss. As these kids realize how stupid have we been to think that there's some kind of wall or some kind of boundary between us and this other group. And so that piece, going back to Amelia Earhart, is the piece that we're most proud of, because we've been doing it for over 30 years, maybe 35 now. And many of those graduates from Camp Anytown have gone on to be state assembly people. Dave Washington was in charge of the fire department for many years. Tyrone Thompson was a state assemblyman. And incredible individuals who realize something very profound, which is what Ramakrishna and Vivekananda and the gang have taught us all. And that is, there's absolutely nothing that separates us but our own ignorance. And when we open our eyes and our hearts to that realization, then a quality of joy begins to emerge from within. It was in 1973 that I was in Humboldt State with 3,000 meditators. And we were meditating under this beautiful tent. And over in the corner, somebody began to giggle. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but 3,000 of us under the tent. And it was like a wave that moved across this group of human beings of joy as people just began to burst out in laughter. And it went to the other side and it came back and went back and forth several times before the period of meditation was over. It was at that moment I realized that bliss is our birthright and that we've been swindled if we think anything otherwise. And so yesterday as I walked into the bank, the tellers looked at me. Dina, she looked at me and she said, "Guard, do you always smile?" I said, "It hasn't always been the case." And I will tell you that I grew up with two alcoholic parents. I used to climb out the outside of my house to get to my room because invariably they would yell at me and sometimes hit. And my ACE score, anybody know what ACE means? Adverse childhood experiences, you might want to check it out. But that and your hope score, both are 10 questions, are probably some of the clearest indicators of how your life is going to unfold without, thank you, Swami, any intervention. So as a result of that, over 50 years, I've been through a lot of healing, and the interfaith movement has been a big part of that healing as we come together as brothers and sisters. And that's exactly what Vivekananda got everybody on their feet said at that 1893 Parliament. Brothers and sisters of America, thank you. Right? It's such a privilege to share with you the wonder and the dignity of a tradition that has been so tolerant and so embracing of other traditions. And that's precisely what he did. And then he went on to quote the Sermon on the Mount, to share with the people there that, you know, that the journey is, and that's my last book, The Spiritual Journey, is to become perfect, even as God is perfect. And, you know, I scratched my head when I first read that. Perfect, even as God is perfect. What could that mean? And I've come to appreciate that I think if it means anything, it means to love others, even as God loves us. And so if I can be a little more loving toward others in the journey, then maybe I'm moving a little closer to what that sermon suggests. So the interfaith movement has gone through a lot of evolution. And I want to say that B. Griffiths and Wayne Teasdale and others, Thomas Keating, have suggested that the interfaith movement is now moving toward what we might call interspirituality. Familiar with this term? And interspirituality basically says there's some inner work that we need to do, and there's some outer work that we need to do. And we need to be engaged in both the inward and the outward. And when we do that, then the world shifts. And so I think I'm going to close there. I do have 8 books. There's 5 more in the car. So if anybody would like a copy of Ramayana, what I've done with that book is I've done something which in tradition is called Lectio Divina. Lectio Divina suggests, like the yogas, that there are 4 ways of understanding reality. With the heart, the head, with the body, and with the soul. So in Christian and Jewish tradition, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. And so I've approached the Ramayana in all four modalities to help us appreciate that the journey really entails not just a part of us, but all of us. So, any questions? It's a joy to be here. I live on the other side of the moon, a place called Boulder City. Have you ever heard of it? We say if you get to the third light of Boulder City, you're in Kingman, Arizona.
How long have you been in Las Vegas?
Since 1985.
It's quite a long time.
So, yeah, I tell my students I'm doing redemption work for my father. My father came to Vegas for all the wrong reasons. He's the only person that ever got a ticket going down Las Vegas Boulevard at 25 miles an hour. Now, there were some circumstances. It was at 2 a.m. He was in his bathrobe. He was drunk. And he was in reverse.
Oh my God.
And the lady in the back was not my mother.
Oh no.
So I may have been conceived in Las Vegas. I don't know. And he told the arresting officer, he said, you know, the forward gear didn't work, so I just had to go in reverse. Anyway, he was a character. And so I tell people I'm here to do redemption work.
That's amazing. And what brought you to become a professor, and how did you lead? What led you there?
Well, you know, I say, you know, there are two halves to the brain, right? One half is the logical analytical function. And so I was a certified public accountant for 25 years.
Wow.
So I took care of many people like Oscar and Carolyn Goodman were my clients, and many, many wealthy people. I used to give financial planning seminars. And you know what I would tell them, Swami? I would say, you know what God thinks of money? Look at the people he gave it to. See? You know what I'm saying? I know 12 billionaires in the community. They're some of the most miserable people you ever want to meet. And they don't give anything. And it's like Ravana. It's like, how much can you accumulate? Sam Walton said, I can only put on one pair of pants at a time. So it is astounding to me that we live in a world of such wealth and such a separation. And I know this is happening in India as well, that there's such great wealth and there's such great poverty at the same time. And so, you know, I come back to Albert Einstein's principles to close, which is that unity, diversity, and this is the essence of interfaith, is seeing the unity in our diversity and then allowing ourselves to grow from that vision and to be hopeful. But out of that, again, love, compassion, and hope emerge. And out of that, I tell my students, come, I think, the Bill of Rights that the universe writes. Anybody ever heard of the universe's Bill of Rights? So out of unity comes the right to exist of all beings, not just human beings, but of all beings with dignity. Out of diversity comes the right to exist in compassionate community. We all have that right. This is compassionate community here. And then the third right, which is the growth piece, which is the right to become exactly who you were intended to become. And what I know with my 71 years on the planet is that each of us has a gift that is unique to us. And mom or dad, uncle or aunt, nobody can tell us what it is. Only we can discover it by doing the inner work and the outer work. And when we discover it, do we laugh? Right? It's Kabir. Kabir, what separates you from God? Kabir, get out of the way. Our own little egos. And so I take great joy in teaching the Bhagavad Gita and trying to suggest to my students who, in the beginning of class, you know, after showing the fossils and rocks, they all think I'm eccentric. And by the second week, I'm really eccentric. But by the middle of class, they start to open their eyes and I can see the sparkle as they begin to realize that, yeah, they too have a gift that they are here to bring. And the Bhagavad Gita is just such a wonderful story of how we manifest that gift. We're the greatest Arnold Schwarzenegger in the universe, Arjuna, Bruce Willis, Arnold Schwarzenegger, call him what you will, fails and it collapses. And as I tell my students, that's the first yoga. It's the yoga of depression. And one might think, well, no, that's a mental health issue. Well, actually, Dr. Carl Jung said, actually, that's the way we begin to get in touch with our inner self. Depression forces us to look inside. And so with that, as we know from the Gita, Krishna comes and he begins to share the yogas, the teachings of the ancient rishis. And that's when everything begins to blossom. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Any other questions for the doctor? Don't hold back.
Okay.
So I do have 8 books.
Yeah, I'd like to
There's
know.
Mirabai's in there. The whole gang, Ramakrishna's in there. They're all in there. Paramahansa Yogananda. I take 2 retreats a year. I go to Lake Shrine. Anybody been to Lake Shrine?
Yes, you'll notice on our altar, you'll see Paramahansa Yogananda.
Oh yeah,
You'll see
yeah.
Mahavatar Babaji, which is
Yeah.
carved from Arunachala Mountain.
Oh yeah.
Ramana Maharshi.
Ah,
So
beautiful,
we have
beautiful.
representations, yes.
In Interfaith, I tell people, I say, when I go to Lake Shrine, there's Krishna. Wow, fantastic. But on the other side, there's Jesus. And I said, what Christian church have you been into recently where you see Jesus and Krishna? But in the temple, we see Krishna and Jesus.
I got Jesus and Mother Mary over
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
I got Buddha over here.
Well, and anybody read Autobiography of Yogi? So in there, he has a vision of Jesus. And he actually regards Jesus as more significant than Krishna. As Muhammad regarded Jesus as more significant than the others. So anyway, this interfaith stuff is really pretty cool. I tell people, if you take it seriously, you get a 3-day weekend. Sabbath on the Friday, right? If you're Muslim, Sabbath on the Saturday. If you're Jewish, Sabbath. So I had one student, she came in, she was born Jewish, she married a Muslim, and then as a result of the class, she became Buddhist. So she is affectionately, I call Karen my Jubamu. So again, at the end of the day, it's about realization. Labels don't mean anything.
People have to realize it's a lot more fun to have friends than enemies.
Yeah, I know. I tell my students, it's a game show. Door number 1 is fear, anger, and anxiety. Door number 2 is love, joy, and peace. Now here's your first examination in the class. Which door do you want? And by the way, if you want door number 1, fear, anxiety, and anger, please don't raise your hand. Come see me after class. So yeah, it is quite a ride. Would you all agree it's been quite a ride, especially those of us that are a little older, watching it all? And you teach Montessori. My kids went to Waldorf. Did you say you were sharing a Montessori song?
Oh, no. I was singing one of the Swami Vivekananda.
Oh, okay. Beautiful. I went to Apple Music to look for the oratory, but it's not on there.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Maybe you should put it on.
Yeah. I've often thought about the myth that so many cultures had about Astarte and Esther and all. A lot of them start with something falling into a body of water, like a star falling into a body of water. It seemed to me that's probably something like a meteor, a meteor falling into a body of water, and then the ripples are the manifestation coming out like the Om, the original Om sound. So.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, it's quite an amazing thing when you look at the story of life. I bring in a 50-foot tape with all geologic periods. And I tell my students, I can't really tell you about the story of Indian philosophy. I teach Indian philosophy, Chinese philosophy, the history of philosophy, and world religions, which is really an amazing
That was going to be
privilege.
my next question, is which courses you teach?
Yeah, it's an amazing privilege because in every one of those courses, there's an opportunity to open the eyes of the students. And I had one student come up to me a few years back and she said, I want to thank you. And I said, for what? She said, you know that concept of Sangha? You all know this is Sangha? She said, last Saturday night, I was invited on a very fancy boat out to Lake Mead, very big yacht. It's quite beautiful. Lake Mead is quite. She said, but I began to think about my Sangha. And she said, I realized that the owner of the boat was not bringing his wife, but bringing a mistress. That there was going to be a lot of alcohol and drugs on the boat. And she said, this is not my Sangha. Long story short, that boat hit one of the rock walls of Lake Mead at 2 a.m. Everybody was killed except the captain.
Oh my
So I share that story with my students, telling them Sangha is good for your health.
God.
Right one, the right one.
Yeah, and it was once upon a time I was with Swami Atmavidyanandaji, and we were talking about building a peace pyramid on the mall in Washington, D.C. And Carole King was part of it. There were a number of interesting people that were part of it. And we were told flatly, no, this is where the memorial for the war dead go. We just said, but maybe we could talk about peace a little bit. But Swami Satchidananda was quite a character. I don't know if you ever went to his ashram.
I did get to hear Thomas Keating, and I was able to go to, it was either the last or the next to the last of the Interfaith events at Snowmass.
Oh, were you there?
Yeah, just 1 year.
Wonderful. And there were a number of people that were there.
Yeah.
And so you were part of that conversation.
Yeah, just for the 1 year. I wasn't the regular representative, I was a guest, so I was. And I heard him a lot earlier than that, back in the 80s, and he really had the kind of energy I remember coming from Swami Prabhupada. Swami Prabhupada would speak. One of the few people I can say.
Yeah. But I tell people when there's realization, there's downloading. and Thomas Keating was very famous for saying, and in conclusion, a half hour later, and in conclusion, half hour later, and in conclusion. Finally, you just gave up the in conclusions. So thank you for your patience and
Thank you.
tolerance. And
So much.
We have a few minutes now that I found that this only wrong track was the first track. I could play the parable of the blind folks. I'm assuming it's got to be on here. So we'll.
So while he's finding it, I had a question. So one of the things I think you say that we all came from the same, the Big Bang Theory, if you will.
no, in India, it's not called Big Bang.
It's in US.
No, well, you know what it's called in India? The Big Blossom.
Okay. But where I was going is that, saying you're my brother and my sister, but the thing is that it's really, if you go back, it isn't brothers and sisters, we're all the same. Right?
If we go back, we're brothers and sisters.
No, I'm saying that we came from the original source.
Right.
We are in
the
our
source.
religion, we are saying we are all the same.
Right.
It isn't that we are separate.
No.
Brothers and sisters is separate, but,
No.
no,
As Thomas Keating says, the only thing that keeps us from God, unity, God consciousness is the thought of separation.
and the original source isn't separate,
Yeah.
it's the same, it's the horizon, right, it's
Right.
all the same.
The journey back past that thought is a long journey.
Yeah. Meditation helps.
Meditation helps because we all have trauma. And if you look at your ACE score, it's an interesting thing. I have a 4, which anything above a 3 is pretty potent. But students, I asked them to do it. One of them came up and said, I have a 9. I said,
Wow.
let's meditate. Let's meditate.
Well, let's see what,
See what she has to say.
Push a button, any button, right?
Ramakrishna saying, hello there, Swami.
Mhm.
So I'll just hope tracks and see what happens. This is it. Okay. So I elaborated a lot for the blind folks in the elephant and set up a scenario where the entertainment guide, you could say, for this group of blind people has taken them to the circus in order to experience the animals firsthand by feeling them, since they can't enjoy the circus by seeing them. So he's taken them on a special excursion, you could say, and he's set this all up so that they will learn this lesson. And he's kind of got all of the trainers of these animals in on the this experience that they will then come to the right conclusion. So, and my sister sings the Kinkajou trainer, so you'll get to hear her beautiful voice.
Circus has her magic town, filled with animals and clowns. You are blind and cannot see them. I reach to have you feel last attempts on either side, and I will leave you as your guide. Each trainer will bring out his charge. Some are small, others large. My sight is just yet, unless you touch them, you will have the chance. This is quite experimental, but I don't know the project. Silence, please, the star you plant comes from the sides of elephants. Growing each has a start, like having breath, one strong heart. But the total world causes you to fight one. The elephant is crying, honest, his words are one before us. Touch the side, touch the ear, you smell a thing lying on here. You leave you know the trunk, but from the rest I must make you up. Something is being a war, words will always make us go.
Your sister has quite a beautiful voice.
Yeah. Who are the people singing?
Mhm.
Who are the musicians?
There's a mixture of some devotees and some paid professionals.
And who composed it?
I did.
Oh,
Composes all of it.
very nice. We would love to see a play on this.
Oh, yeah, it's not dramatized, but anyway, yeah.
That would be good.
Well, I have a friend who's putting together the Interfaith musical,
Oh,
and I might put her in touch
Yeah.
with you because that would be a lovely piece to add.
yeah,
Mhm.
It's an important story.
yeah.
Where do it with the play, kids.
Well, we're hoping to bring it to UNLV, so that's what we're working on here. It's quite well done.
Is it roots?
Who's putting up the?
You know Ruth?
Very well.
So you must be my sister.
We've been to Parliament of Religions together.
Yes.
Seven
Once you
nights.
know Ruth, you fall in love with Ruth. Yeah.
She's wonderful.
She is wonderful. So you know about the musical.
Yeah.
So you know about the musical too? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Beautiful.
But I love the little last line. In this case, I think you'll find that seeing God, most all are blind. We think it quite orthodox to put God in our own box. God is infinite, but we're going to make him this way. Rather, we should realize that God is infinite in size.
Yes.
All right, let's take the last few minutes to allow people to.
Also,
offer a
I
flower.
want to make one announcement. We're changing our, instead of Saturday, we do our class in pujas on Sunday. So Sunday at 4 p.m. we do a puja, 5 p.m. we'll do the class and chanting. So we'll do that Sundays instead of Saturdays. So we'll be sending out the emails as usual. We've heard it's better Sunday. It seems like a more natural date. So we switched up religion somehow. I think we went to Judeo-Christian mode.
Well, you forgive me. I am the chef for my wife.
Oh, I'm
And
sure.
I told her I would be home at 7:30.
How do we get your book?
What's that?
How do we get your
I'll
book?
put them on the front door.
Okay.
There's 3 here and there's 5 with the
What do we owe you for them?
So please take them all.
And that one student that was dressed quite sharply.
Yes, Krishna?
No, this the gentleman on the, he was sitting over on this side, halfway back.